All right, so coming off the last video of the meditation series, I left us at a point where we were the constituted raw materials, right? And if you got what I was talking about, I kind of don't want to change that, okay? So this video here, we're just going to stick with the guided part, and we're not going to meditate today, but it's part of the meditation series. And we're going to cover a broad range of topics today. And I'm going to, in a way, leave them on their own. And again, they're pretty broad. There's a lot in between the topics. And I wanted us to draw all the correlations on our own for the next week after the video is over. Okay, just give it mind and pay attention. And this is a continuation, but this is just the guided part. And then next week, perhaps we'll do one last meditation. But coming off the last video, I brought in this idea of essence, right? And the way I derived to the idea of essence is coming off from the early parts of this whole lecture is coming from my video Kant 1, okay? And in Kant 1, I was talking about value and understanding, right? And in the last video, I was saying on top of value and understanding, there's speculation, right? When we speculate something, it has to do with some type of value and understanding. And what I said was of the essence also is the ability, right? The ability is of the essence, right? And I was saying that the essence is the ability to do all this, right? And ability is something that is not phenomenal in a way, okay? Our ability is something that is real, and it's real that the configuration has to have an ability to exist, right? And it goes through all these rules and stuff. One way to talk about the rules is I'm going to talk about phenomenal rules real quick, and then we'll move on. But when we look at the beginning of the universe, or at least the beginning of what we have now from the Big Bang, is what the universe was comprised of was really four main elements when it started, okay? And these are the lightest elements on the periodic table: hydrogen, helium, lithium, and beryllium, okay? So for a large amount of the beginning of the universe, there were only four elements. And then the elements got heavier. And then eventually the rest of the periodic table came into being, okay? I would say when we look at that, the phenomena, in that sense, we would say that there were rules, right, that the existence had to go through to go through the other periodic elements, right? You can say that those rules are real rules and they exist. Those rules exist, but they're not phenomenal. Okay? And that's just like one way that I kind of want to describe our ability, right? Our ability is a principle, right? It's a principle of our existence for us to be able to speculate or constitute. The principle is that we have to have an ability. Okay? And that's all I want to say about essence today. Well, I'm going to say more, but I'm going to focus on another end or another modality of what we're talking about. I'm going to bring us to a modern day, I would say modern, I still consider modern day discussion in philosophy about the essence, okay? So, in continental philosophy, there was a few main philosophers that really had an impact on where the state of philosophy is, right? And one is Martin Heidegger. And Martin Heidegger was from Germany, but he wrote a book called Being and Time, and it was published in 1929, right? When he wrote Being and Time in 1929, that was, the most important book at that time, for sure. About 15 years later, right, and a little bit after that, what happens is World War II happens, and the French philosophers, the ones that were in Paris at that time, they were in occupation, right? So when the Germans occupied France, what happened was the philosophers were put in jail by Germany. And that is kind of interesting, right? But it's kind of pointing out what philosophers were going through in the 1900s, right? And again, Heidegger was from Germany, Sartre was from France, right? Sartre went to jail when the Nazis took over Paris for a while, right? But Germany loses and France gets liberated, right? But the academic situation or the philosophical atmosphere at that time, it was dominated, I would say, at that time by Sartre in France, and I would say Heidegger from Germany, right? Two ends of the war, in a way, mainly in Europe, right? But what happens is, a lot of the philosophers in France, what they did was, in a way, you could kind of look at it as Germany occupying Paris. They surrounded Paris in a way before they occupied it, in a way. And this is not the first time it happened. It happened in World War I, I believe, where Germany occupied Paris. But what I want to point out is the figure of Martin Heidegger. His philosophy was kind of occupied by a bunch of French philosophers, right? What Heidegger did, he did his thing, and a bunch of French philosophers surrounded all his thoughts, right? I would say, ironically, the way Germany occupied Paris, okay? That's just something that I correlate together. It's interesting. So the philosophies themselves, right? John Paul Sartre. He writes this book called Existentialism is a Humanism. Okay. And existentialism is a humanism, the way I was described by a few teachers in my early academic years, is humanism is when is existence is a special type of existence, right? Humanism is a special type of existence. And the best way to describe it is being able to objectively write a letter or put words together, right? So Sartre in his book has this line that says, and it's famous, and this is the most clear-cut understanding or definition of existentialism, is that existentialism believes that existence precedes the essence. Okay. Existence precedes the essence. And I was talking about the essence as something that is non-phenomenal. The essence is real, and the essence is the actual ability. The essence is value and understanding, but the essence is not phenomenal in a way, okay? We could say it is borrowed from experience, but it is, the contrary is conceivable, and the experience is refutable, okay? We don't have to really deal with the actual phenomena when we talk about the essence, okay? The essence has its own rules of its own existence as compared to the phenomena belongs to the natural world's rules, okay? It's science, right? I mean, I might be able to have some type of control, right? But ultimately, the things that I do in the phenomena, it was already, in a way, written out in some type of scientific unraveling, right? Everything that we do in the phenomena is scientifically justified, and it's the world of science, okay? So when Sartre says existence precedes essence, right? He's saying that what is going to get unraveled, what is going to be revealed to us, has to have the objective human reality preceding the actual unraveling, right? So we are unraveling something that already existed, right? This, especially when we talk about words and dialogues and scripts. And so what happens is he's saying existence precedes essence, right? And you can kind of look at it as the definition exists for the humans already for us to know when we experience it that this is the actual human experience, right? Existence precedes essence. So another way to describe it is coming off Sartre, right? He has other philosophers that follow Sartre, right? One of them is Lyotard. And Lyotard, he wrote an essay called The Postmodern Condition, right? And the postmodern condition was just saying that there's just rules and games to language, okay? And what we have are meta-narratives. And these meta-narratives go through a rule or a function. And we work out these meta-narrative functions and we get what the narrative actually is. But on the grand scheme of things, there's what you call a grand narrative, right? Everything that you could possibly say belongs in this grand narrative, right? You could look at it as all the dictionaries and all the different languages going through different rules. And when we experience those rules, that is the existence, right? The human existence. And we are experiencing the human existence through the grand narrative, right? And that is, I would say, more than what Sartre was saying, but that is a more refined definition of existence. Or humanism, existence as a humanism, okay? And again, essence is just the noumenal reality of things, okay? About, I'm really trying to put all the weight on this idea of ability. The essence is the ability. And what the ability, the faculty of the ability has to have is the essence, right? The ability to speculate. Okay. So I want us to put that on the side, okay? That is existence precedes essence and Sartre, and what I wanted to say in perhaps contrast to what I was talking about, the essence, okay? Now, the next topic I want to talk about is Eastern philosophy in general. So I want to talk about a few things about Eastern philosophy. When the 1950s was going on, right, during all this, Heidegger actually put in, he wrote an essay on metaphysics, right? And in one of those essays, he talked about being and nothingness, okay? And the nothingness I want to point out is the way I would describe is Sartre's humanistic existence, right? His humanistic existence is being is it's not being, but it's nothingness, right? So we're being, and he's placing this nothingness as a humanism. It's just unraveling the phenomenal world, right? And the phenomenal world is purely ruled by natural laws of physics and science, okay? So what he's saying is even when we say nothing, right? We have the idea of nothing, but our experience of saying nothing is actually everything, right? No has everything that you're experiencing. The all that, it's there is no nothing, I would kind of say, right, to kind of describe it. There is no such as nothing. Nothing is actually everything, right? When you strip away uh, uh, when you strip away the common conception of nothing, our dialectic exchange, our dialogue, nothing is the lights that are in front of my eyes and just the camera that's in front of me. I'm saying nothing, but nothing is actually everything, okay? And I want to say that to introduce Eastern philosophy, okay? So this is in the Western, this is 1950s, right? And earlier. But in the Eastern world, nothing is transposed, you could say, as emptiness, right? Old Asian philosophy texts use this idea of emptiness in the BC era, right? And emptiness, I want to talk about by going through our guided meditations. But emptiness, I want to equivocate it here with our breath, okay? And in Eastern philosophy, when you read Lao Tzu, which is one of two major philosophers of the Axial period, Lao Tzu was the philosopher of the yin and yang symbol, and he talked about things like the Tao Te Ching, which was the way of change, right? DAODE CHING, Tao Te Ching, or sometimes there's T apostrophe Ching, or sometimes the Tao and the Day is spelled with a T. But I'm Vietnamese, so I must stick with the D. Tao Te Ching, the way of change, right? And in his Way of Change book, what he would talk about is breath, right? He mentions breath a lot. And I feel like the hardest thing that I've ever had to describe in philosophy, and I still uh, am not really articulate about it, is when I think of spirituality, I think of breathing, right? And there's just a couple facets that makes me think of it as being spiritual. Okay. Um, when I when we breathe, right, and we look at what's going on here, and I want to say that breathing is of the essence. Breathing is a necessary condition of existence, right? It's a principle of our existence. Breathing is an expansion and a contraction, right? I don't want to say that we as individuals are breathing as much as I want to say that the universe itself is breathing, right? I like to paste two modalities together when I think about breathing, okay? I think of space, right? Or I use it just to really understand breathing and how it is of the essence. I'm thinking of space, right? And space itself, in a way, we could say is a particular type of space. But we don't want to say empty space, right? The configurative space, we don't want to say that it's empty space, but it is just space, okay? Connected to that, right? I want to say there's a type of causality to plane space, a causality to plane space. And the causality linked to plane space is, in a way, vacuous, okay? Vacuous. And when we put it up to our breathing function, our ability to breathe, right? The essence of the universe is to breathe, right? And we are, in a way, just connecting to this breath, okay? We're connecting to this breath of the universe. So, in a way, it is vacuous. And we, as individuals, latch on to this thing, okay? To the essence. And the way I describe our breath is, in Eastern philosophy, this emptiness, the breath itself, I would say, is the everything, right? Is the power, right? So the word Tai Chi is the chi in it is the power. In the Tao Te Ching, he talks about chi. Every time he talks about power, it's a correlation of the breath, okay? And when I'm in Eastern philosophy mode, you could say, when I talk about breath, I would say our breath is empty, okay? But what I'm also saying is that our breath is full of everything, right? Chinese philosophy has a word that says 10,000 things. On the face of it, you could say it's nothing, but on the other hand, there's 10,000 things, and it's everything, right? It is emptiness. So our breath is the emptiness, right? It's the power, right? We're talking about power. So that's very important, okay? So I have, at the end of this video, I'm going to play an excerpt of Jet Li's Hero, okay? And I'm just going to spend the rest of the next couple minutes explaining this. So the scene of this video is there's an army invading a little compound, or where there's people who are doing calligraphy, right? And I think the hero's name is like no, I'm not gonna say, I don't know. But this scene, it's 3 minutes long. So instead of the meditation, we're gonna watch Jet Li's Hero for 3 minutes. So I hope y'all enjoy it. But one way that I learned what emptiness is this idea called a flying white, right? Flying white, the color white, a flying white, okay? A flying white is, when you do calligraphy, is where the brush touches onto the paper, right? The brush touches onto the paper, and then it raises itself, and it does whatever, and then it goes back down onto the paper, right? So the flying white is, you could say, the empty part between the brush strokes on the paper, okay? Flying white. We're talking about emptiness, okay? So that's one way to describe the emptiness, right? And another way to describe it is to say that things have inscription, okay? When it's on that white paper, between the two strokes, it inscripts everything, right? When I say nothing, me saying nothing is overriding the existence, and it's representative as I say nothing, everything, okay? So the flying white is representative of everything, right? In between the two brush strokes, right? The way it lands on the paper, it has inscripted everything that happened before, right? It's responsive, right? The whole existentialist thing. Sartre mainly said that everything was purely responsive, okay? So a flying white is between the two brushstrokes on the paper. You could say, because we're talking about Asian culture in a way, or Asian people have, really black hair, and sometimes it's long and thick, and it's really black, right? But when the light shines on it, there's like a little glare on it, right? A bunch of parallel lines, and there's a glare on it. And I've always looked at that as you could say a different modality of the flying white, right? It's like someone's hair could tell you everything. And, you know, just, the hair has been through what the human has been through, right? I remember this now. Oops. Remember the story when I said that this was the answer, right? This was thousands of generations of experience, right? What else was I saying? Okay, so the scene with the Jet Li movie is 1,000 arrows flying into a calligraphy school, you could say. And what's going on is there's just a lot of arrows being shot that's raining down on them, right? It's like an arrow storm. And people are getting hit, right? And you'll notice when people are getting hit, what's going on is they're still carrying on, right? They're holding an arrow with one hand that's like hanging out their back, and they're using the other hand to write calligraphy, right? And one of the Asian philosophy sayings is, one of the proposed, you say, dilemma or something is when somebody gets shot with an arrow, what do you do, right? Why do you ask who killed them, right? Or what matters is that there's an arrow in you, and you're thinking of who the hell would do this, and it's kind of like off subject, right? And you kind of put that into the scheme of things, but a lot of times people are going to war and they know they're going to die, but they kind of have to do it anyways, right? One example is the Greek Spartan Leonidas, King Leonidas, right? Initially, they went to fight the Persian army, but when they got to Thermopylae, they knew they were outnumbered, and someone betrayed them to give the path to the Persians to overcome the Greek army, right? And the Greek army was made up of many different city-state groups, right? But the Spartans were like, you know what? The rest of the city-states, y'all go back. The Spartans got this, okay? They knew they were going to die. They were outnumbered. They knew they were betrayed. When they knew that, they sent everyone else back, right? And Leonidas knew that his death, because he was a good leader, or so revered by the Greeks, or by at least the Spartans, and perhaps more, that if they were to take him out, he knew that it would unite Greece to overtake the Spartans, right? And that it was kind of like a consequential thing, right? And at the same time, I was just doing that in a correlation to these people doing calligraphy where they're getting shot by arrows. And this scene was during the Warring States period, right? The Warring States period was shortly after Confucius died, right? And Confucius was a philosopher, but he was more like a sage and an advisor to a lot of other kings, right? And to a lot of just different factions at the time, right? And when he dies, 3 years later, starts the warring period. And you kind of see all the stuff that Confucius was saying about good rulers and bad rulers kind of play out for 100 or so years during the warring states, right? But Confucius was already talking about kings and the way they ruled their states, because when he writes his Analects, it's about this king was a good king, this magistrate was a good magistrate, because this is what happened, right? He dies, and then China breaks into war. I'm not saying that China broke into war because he died. I'm just saying that that was the type of philosophy he was doing, right? He was very knowledgeable about traditions and culture, right? But after he dies, there's 7 main kingdoms of China, and they go to war for like 100 or 2 years, right? And Jet Li's Hero is a movie that kind of like unifies through conquest, you could say, that unifies the 7 states, okay? And he, at this point, he is with one compound of a certain, of one of the 7 states or something. And they're being shot by arrows, right? And people are getting shot and they're still doing calligraphy, right? So they're being stoic. But they are, in a way, doing what journalists do when they go to another war and get murdered. They are the messenger, right? They are doing the message of the messenger. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna end this video with this video on Jet Li's Hero.